I just had a few players message me straight up, why would I put myself out there and do extra for my club for no reward other than getting hammered by a journo?
There are so many layers to Paddy Dangerfield, and he's got strong views on all the big issues, including the media. Having already put together an all-time great AFL career, he still craves a whole lot more, and he will seek to get it his way. Paddy Dangerfield, thanks for joining us on In the Game.
Thanks, Damo. Thanks for having me.
Being Paddy Dangerfield, what is that like?
Well, it's changed over the last few years. It's gone from obviously playing out of state, then playing in state, and then being part of two successful organisations. But then kids on top of that adds a whole different layer to it. And then on top of that, I suppose, there's different responsibilities within the PA now, having been on that board for some time. But life's good. Life's really enjoyable.
There's so many layers to you, and we'll, I suppose, pull back a couple of those layers in the next hour or so. But at the core of you is clearly the footballer and the one who's idolised by so many people. When you, even today, get someone come to you at a young age with a notebook, wanting an autograph, or a phone, wanting a photo, can you put yourself back in those shoes?
I understand it more now as you understand being a parent. I don't think you get it as a player until you have kids, just how influential and how much of a difference a quick hello can be, or just how you are when you talk to kids that are so nervous to come and speak to you and ask for a photograph. I didn't get it at the start of my career, and now being a dad and seeing how much George loves Thomas the Tank Engine, if you could meet Thomas, holy crap, that is the real appreciation I get now of you're so influential as an athlete, and especially with the biggest game in the country that the AFL is. You really do have a responsibility to the game and to your club and to yourself to promote that in the right light.
George has helped you with that, obviously, as you say?
Without a doubt.
Yeah.
And that's where it starts from, because you go, life is so much bigger than just yourself, and you're a very selfish, or I certainly was, a very selfish person until you have kids and you realise that this little life now depends on you. It's a great grounding base, and I think it allows you to appreciate the other things in life, and just also the hard times that other players will go through, because you go through them in different ways, whether it be parenting or not sleeping or George broke his foot a couple of weeks back, which was just horrific. And it was my fault. I landed on him, unfortunately.
Michael Voss once broke his son's arm in a playful tackle, and you've broken your son's foot.
Falling down the stairs, so breaking news. You know, that does give you an appreciation, yeah.
Yeah. In the weird perspective that a toddler has he got any grasp of your life?
I don't think so, and I think this comes back to, I remember playing in Adelaide with Eddie Betts' kids, and it was so great to have kids come in after the game. And Louis and Billy, Eddie's sons, that's all they've ever known. They just think it's normal to be rolling around with Rory Sloane, Taylor Walker, Tom Lynch. Yeah, that's normal. It's so unnormal, but they grow up in it. And I was chatting to Gaz last week. Actually, we were talking about kids in change rooms, and he was talking about his time and whether he had. I was asking whether he had memories of going in with his dad, and he was saying he had memories, and he remembered a game where they'd been smashed, and all the players were in this meeting, and apparently Blighty was going nuts, and obviously Senior was in the room, and Gary just walked in and said, "Dad, when are we going? We're bored." And then that was the end of the meeting. And that's what kids bring to footy clubs. And there's some great stories out there.
How bad is the foot broken?
He's out of a cast now. So he was in a half cast for a couple of weeks. And there is no worse feeling as a parent when you're supposed to be their protector. And we're in emergency for a few hours, which was fun.
What did Marty say?
She was pretty good about it. Yeah. It was, funnily enough, it was after the GWS game, so it had been a putrid day, and then to end up in emergency after that, it was like, oh, God, could this day get any worse? But he's all right now. He's all right now.
And just before we move on, Paddy, just with the idolising of yourself and people before you, who was it that you most idolised as a youngster?
I love watching Wayne Carey growing up. I remember so distinctively, I suppose, as a 10, 11-year-old, that players would sort of corral him. They wouldn't tackle him because they were obviously fearful of what he could do. And I remember just thinking, like, how incredible that would be in a game if you were just so universally admired, respected, feared, that players would be nervous to come up and tackle you. And that's the sort of... that's how the Duck played. He was a special player, and I love Nathan Buckley as well. The way that he kicked the footy and impacted games. Those two were the ones that I looked at, and I was sort of a loose Geelong supporter. I wasn't crying if they were losing, but they were the local team.
Yeah. Did you put the autograph book out? Did you get the?
I never did. No, I was never that fully invested into it. Would go to a few Geelong games here and there, but was never chasing player signatures or anything like that.
Yeah. 29 now. Apart from the obvious of a premiership, what else do you want to achieve in your footy career?
That's all that really matters.
Yeah.
I think when you first start...
So right now, you're unfulfilled?
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah.
Yep, no doubt.
And unsuccessful, or is that too strong?
I suppose if you just define success on premierships, then unsuccessful. But I think there's more layers to it than just that. Unfulfilled, definitely. That I watch grand finals now, and having gone to a few, sort of 13, 14, I'd go and watch and, wow, sort of be invested in the game. Because no matter who you are, I don't think when you watch a game of footy, there's always some part of you that ends up barracking for some team. Wanting some team to do well. And now I look at it and I wait for the end of the game and the players doing their laps of recognition and just what that moment would be like to have totally done it all, to have achieved what 18 teams went out to do and you've done it. And where that would put you as a team or individually as a player, having done everything that you've ever aspired to do. Like, I understand how it could be really challenging the following years, and it was fascinating to hear Dusty talk about this, a month ago. Where to from here once you've done it all? And for me, that lure of the grand final is just so strong that nothing other than that really matters. But it's an interesting predicament for players that get in that position once they do win. Wow, you've done it all. Where to from here?
And hearing you talk, as you are now, about that component of your life, in this same podcast a few weeks ago, Nathan Buckley spoke about, and I'm paraphrasing, obviously, but until recently he wasn't able to enjoy his successes, in inverted commas, because he hadn't achieved the ultimate, yet he's now taught himself a way to do so, and he's a better person for it. You obviously contrasted with that, aren't you? You are different along the way. You seem to have embraced the successes you've had personally and obviously the relative successes of team.
Yeah, I think I certainly understand where Nathan's coming from, though, because I play in a team of some incredible champions that have absolutely done it all, and you sit in different functions and you attend different events, and they're introduced as the champions that you are. Yeah. And I think we're very flippant sometimes with the words that we use, and then they'll talk about the player that I am, but I feel so small compared to those individuals that have just done everything, because nothing really matters apart from winning it all, I don't think.
Really?
The longer that you're in the game, you start off and you think, how great would it be to win a best and fairest? How wonderful and awesome would it feel to be All-Australian? A Brownlow medal, what a dream that would be. But they're things that you can't share with anyone. There's no stories that come out of those awards, unfortunately. There's just not. It's just not that interesting because it's only one person. The things that I'm so envious of is the Geelong reunions that happen quite often, obviously. But the stories that come from that, and just listening to the stories that Joel or Tom or Gary will talk about, or Harry, and just how you just want a piece of that action yourself. You want to be involved or share a story like that. They're the everlasting moments, I think, that are just so precious, because that's all that really matters in the end, the memories from it. So until that happens, there's always, I think, going to be that feeling of want, desire, of a feeling of not experienced at all because I haven't.
Yeah. Yeah. Paddy, you're obviously different to the mould of a footballer as we've been, I suppose, attested to or attuned to. Is that the way you're wired, or have you become that person?
I think I've been conscious always of how I'm viewed, and for different reasons, for the different opportunities that in itself can present commercially. But also understanding that footy is a big part of life, but it's not life. If I let it take over what I do, then I just don't think I'd be the player that I am. For others, it's totally different. They wouldn't be the players they are if they weren't giving and spending just hours upon hours and days upon days thinking and analysing the game.
When was it that you thought you'd go down the path that you've gone down? Was it a conscious decision, or you were already underway and you thought I might as well keep going?
In terms of involvement in the media, or
just being the different person or the different footballer, the way you present.
I've always really enjoyed the media, and even from when I first started, it's always something I sort of looked at and thought I'd like to do that post footy. That's changed a bit over time because I think unfortunately the negative stories have become bigger than the really wonderful stories worth sharing in our game, and whether that's a thirst for the negatives by the public or what have you, I'm not sure. I'm not sure of the balance between it. But it's always really interested me. And I think the world would be and the industry would be a boring place if we always just gave the same mundane answers. There's nothing that frustrates me more than when, the answer is, I just did it for the boys, and the boys are playing really well, and the boys this, and the boys, gosh, surely we're a little bit better than that, aren't we? We're dumbing ourselves down. And that's a ploy from different players at times just to, to do the media appearance you have to do or whatever and move on. But I like to do things a bit differently, and I suppose I've picked different players and their career paths and tried to, implement that into my own philosophies. I loved as a young player. This was before I joined the AFL. I liked the fun that Shane Crawford had within the game. Like, didn't take himself too seriously, performed at a really high level, still really respected, but had fun, could poke fun at himself. It didn't have to be this all serious person. And I really liked that balance that he had. So he was probably one that I looked at and thought, he looks like he has fun with it in a serious game that's worth, billions of dollars. And we can become so overridden with a seriousness. He just has fun with it. Yeah, that's not a bad way of viewing it.
There's strings attached to being who you are, though, aren't there? I mean, maybe initially, early days, people, even peers from other clubs, were thinking, "Who are you? What are you doing?"
100%.
So when you are experienced enough now to look back on those days, how hard was it for you to keep going down that path?
I remember having a chat with Brenton Sanderson at the time. This is in 2012. I went on the footy show and acted like a bit of a dick. I thought it was funny. I dressed up as Jim Carrey, had his hair on, and quoted a few lines.
Yeah,
but
I remember the night.
Yeah, and I think you got to do that. And I think his line at the time was along, what have you done to be able to do that? And it was by no means, barreling me down that. It was more just thinking about where you're at. And he was a really supportive coach of being yourself, but just on how it would be perceived. But I've never been that concerned on how it would be perceived because I was always confident that I could perform, even having fun. And, yeah, you cop a bit at the start, but after a while people realise it's not really a show. It's just you. That's just who you are. You like having fun. And there's some real characters within our game that we don't really get to see the real personalities of with the fear that they have they'll be judged in a negative light, which is a real shame.
Because you're meant to conform, aren't you, as a footballer? I mean, the clubs, and we'll discuss this in a few moments when we get into the media side of this conversation, but ideal world for a club is to have all 48 players on its list or whatever it is conform to their ways and to just be beholden to them and to present in a way they like. But you're a little bit different to it, aren't you?
Well, it depends the environment that you're in. In Adelaide, it was a really interesting environment because you owned the market. Adelaide, at the time, we didn't need to search for a back page because we were always getting it. So you didn't need to find extra exposure for your sponsors. It's different, I find, in Victoria because you've got the challenge of 10 other teams. Yep. So unless you're Collingwood, but even in Collingwood's position, you still need to give out relevant information and stories that are going to warrant, back page and more coverage for your organisation. And I was really cognizant of that, you've got to give more than just the same mundane answers. The easiest thing in the world as a player is just to give the same.
So why are you conscious of that? I mean, that's normally not the role of an individual player, is it? It's someone else within the club to make sure that's happening. But why is it that you've taken that on?
Because I think you can separate yourself from others, and it can create other opportunities for you because you are a bit more interesting than certainly externally than other players that aren't really interested in those potentially, I suppose, different other commercial arrangements that you might enter into. They're just happy to do the interview and move on. But there is opportunities, I think, if you want to pursue a career within the media or have your voice on the game, if you're willing to give a little bit more. And it's not giving away the game plan. It's just giving your own personal view of it in a bit more in-depth.
Yep. The flack you've copped, you mentioned Brenton Sanderson there. Were there other opponents who said stuff to you and
early on, like sort of 2000, 2013, 14, that sort of time when I was sort of starting to grow and to impact games, have some poor form, have some really good games, where there'd be a bit here and there. But I never really let it bother me too much because...
So you just don't care on that front, is it?
Not really.
It's a great quality, isn't
not
it?
Really.
If you've got it.
But, you've also got to be backed internally and I think that you've got to have a strong head of footy that are happy there to stand up for you. And I was really lucky in my time at Adelaide and obviously Geelong and in David Noble at Adelaide, who's obviously now at Brisbane, but as good as it gets when it comes to just understanding that you might have different passions outside of footy. And I think we need to see a bit more personality from players. And I think we're starting to see that because most of the time you're not really going to be shot down. You might get a few headlines here and there because you're apparently getting ahead of yourself. But if you're playing good footy, people shut up pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. Like I look at Max Gawn, and like I love seeing the personality of players. It's just fun. He's just being who he is. He's not being a loudmouth or Larry. Max is just being Max. That's how I see it. And he's comfortable in his own skin to be able to do that. And I think we should promote more of that.
Yeah.
Win, lose or draw regardless of, and that's the big challenge as a player, because when you do lose games, all of a sudden you start to think, shit, how am I presenting myself? Is it looking unprofessional or whatever?
You do think that still?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You've got to be you're conscious of that as a player because you don't want to be seen like that, but you still want to be authentic.
Yeah. And getting out of a comfort zone, Paddy, is that something you've also always sought to do? And an instance of that, I forget the actual year, but you were the MC of one of the AFL.
Oh, that was the worst experience of my life, Damo.
Well, I recall you were sweating up before the show, and you seemed out of your depth.
Out of my depth.
but there was an admiration for you for getting up there to try and do it.
Oh, I remember chatting with Paul. This was the MVP awards in the year 2012, I think it was.
Your breakout year.
And for some reason I said yes to co-hosting with Anthony Hudson, and I was shitting bricks, I won't lie to you. I've never been so nervous in my whole life. Certainly it puts just how... I have so much respect for those that host events like that. I was so nervous. You're looking out in the audience, there's Lee Matthews. Oh, my God, I'm going to make a dick of myself in front of Lee Matthews. There's Caroline Wilson. Shit, what's she going to write in the Age tomorrow? Like, it was just horrific. But I look back now, and I'm really glad that I did it, albeit a really poor host. But you've got to put yourself out there at some stage. My advice to those would be make sure you really put in the effort to do all your research and just know it, because I'm really good at off the cuff.
Yes.
But when it comes to really presenting and sticking to a schedule, as you know, that's an art form in itself.
But the concept of it, I mean, I think from memory, when that night came, you were almost saying, I've got no idea what I'm doing, but I'm going to do it anyway. Was the out of the comfort zone analogy was crucial to where you were at the time?
Yeah, and it certainly was, and I wouldn't change it for the world. Would still have done it even with the result that had happened. But God, it was. I still shiver thinking now, just being so nervous. But the next time you do it, you're not as
better
nervous
off for it.
The next time, and now you don't even think about it.
Yeah. All right, media. the floor is yours.
Well, we had a bit of a...
And go your hardest if you need to.
My issue last week, on the back of your sliding doors argument, and I said to
and for those who forget, it was the Luke Hodge issue of recent times.
Yep, and I was chatting with Jared Waitley on it, and it was so bemusing to me because you are obviously a big part of the media, and I was critical of you that you could be critical of Luke Hodge putting himself out there in a not a new form, because we've seen players interviewed during a game, but I was just so surprised that you would go so hard at him, knowing that this is, I think, the way to grow the game. Not necessarily during a game, but more media access. And I was shocked at that, and I just thought, and have since found out that it's probably put a few players offside and nervous to actually go out there and speak their mind and do something that they might not have thought they would.
On the back of that?
On the back of... Because if you can hit Luke Hodge between the eyes, what hope does someone that's played 50 games or 80 games or 100 games have when Luke Hodge can be judged for engaging in a halftime interview or in-quarter interview?
Look, I've explained it a few times, and part of it, which I've admitted to, was wrong in that I said that he had a contract and he's got a commercial arrangement, but that was wrong. So that's probably got lost a little bit in it. But as a consumer, I don't find it enhances the coverage as a rule, because I feel it's contrived regularly when you know the cameras are on. Now, that's just the view I've got as a viewer.
Did you think, though, when you wrote it, that it obviously gets read by the 500,000 people that have the AFL app and search on afl.com.au, that the players would look into it and go, geez, I'm going to be a bit nervous the next time, or I'm just going to shut up shop?
I didn't think that at all, no.
Yeah.
No.
Because I think that was in the end the big thing for me was it will put players offside and nervous around speaking, because if one of the greats of the game can be hammered for it, and we're pretty good players at finding out, like, regardless of whether you never have any idea about what's written in the papers, somehow it just always gets back.
I tell you what, you never miss it when it's negative.
Yeah. That is so true. That was my issue, and I just thought, well.
But is it that big a deal? I mean, again, I'm happy to concede that I had no idea it would have that impact, and I'm surprised that people are going to react to it. I mean, it was one opinion amongst 19 other opinions against each club that day.
But I suppose,
and maybe I wasn't deeply enough thinking about it when I hit send on it, but I'm staggered to think it's going to change behaviour as an opinion.
Yeah, I think when it's Luke Hodge, it's different because he's such the figure that he is within the game. I think that does change things, and it's just put some nervous players out there that, perhaps are thinking about doing a little bit more. Oh, God, I don't want to be hammered for putting myself out there. I just thought that was a bit of an unwritten rule that you wouldn't attack a player, and attack's the wrong word, for putting themselves out there with an interview.
So what do we do from here?
And I'm not sure an in-quarter interview is the answer, but I've always been really strong on, if we're looking to grow the game, and it's interesting on the back of the ratings that were released yesterday that there's been an uplift. But I'm strong on the fact that we need to do everything that we can as an organisation, and that's the media, this is players, this is the AFL, to grow the pie for absolutely everyone. So players that are coming out playing cricket, that are playing basketball, are choosing AFL because there's a great talent pathway. They're really well rewarded whilst they're in the game, and the game growth within itself isn't affected by streaming services, which have changed the media landscape in recent times. So I think as an industry, we've got a bit of work to do with the CBA running out in 2022, I think it is. There's a bit of work that we've all got to do to make sure that we're not resting on our laurels, and we don't just think it's just going to continue to grow and this beast that is the AFL is untouchable. I don't think we are. We're not untouchable. Anything... I
think there's a feeling inside the AFL itself that it's dicey times for that next rights. Is that your take on it too? Well,
if the ratings continue to go the way that they are, then without a doubt it would be. And we've all got a role to play in that to make sure that it continues to grow. And players have a huge role within that, because the players are the stories. That's where it all comes from. And we've seen what sort of happened with and where the A-League sits at the moment, how that's was doing a good job with juniors, but that's really floundering at the moment when it comes to ratings. We need to find a way to make sure that our game is still on the tongues of everyone, and it's the biggest game in the country.
Who else, I mean, you may not want to name names, but who else had issues with what was written that day by me?
I just had a few players message me straight up that were really uncomfortable with, hang on, if you can smash him, then why would I put myself out there and do extra for my club for no reward other than getting hammered by a journo? And I think that's a relevant question to ask, because you don't get anything out of it, as Phil Davis doesn't when he's going through the banner before a game. He just does it because it's the club have asked for one, and it's the right thing to do to grow their own brand or to put themselves out there. And every club is different. Some are really fighting for market share and trying to make the most of the stage that they're on, because they may only have one Friday night game for the year. So they're trying to really promote themselves. And then there's others that have the luxuries of not needing to chase the coverage because commercially they're in a sound place.
Yep. So with that regard, I mean, I don't feel as though I'm going to change my view on the back of what you're saying. And I don't want that to sound arrogant. I mean, that's just my view on that part of the media coverage with players' involvement.
Yep.
So is there something...
I think it would just be just think, don't underestimate the amount of players that read it, because they do, and the influence that can have, especially when it's one of the game's better players and one of the all-time greats that you smash. Just how that can affect the players that don't feel they've earned the right to be able to speak up and were perhaps thinking about it.
Yeah. Moving off from this part of it, because I know you're passionate about the whole media program, so to speak. The control, though, over the media by the clubs is something that is absolutely a 10 out of 10 right now. The clubs, I feel, from the other side of the fence, need to control that message every single time. Is that stifling? Is that suffocating?
It depends on who you are.
And I'm prepared to... I just want to make clear, I'm distancing this conversation from the one we've just had. I concede every point you've made.
It depends who you are. If you are a young player that's really unsure, then you'll always ask for those key points. I definitely believe that clubs are controlling of the message. There's no doubt about that. There's plenty right throughout the competition. If it's Joel Selwood that's going to speak, then Joel can say what he likes. He's a pro. He's been there. He's done that. If it's a younger player, then you're going to give him points to focus on. Yeah. But I do believe clubs are controlling when it comes to the message at times, and they need to be more relaxed in their view around making players accessible, but also not censoring the message. I think we have this fear of being on the back page unless it's something really, really positive. And a really good example of this in my playing time at Adelaide, Brent Riley used the word boring to describe our game plan. I think it was in 2011, and it was on the back page the next day. But they also, I think it was Andrew Capel that had written the article, but they also followed it up with a story that Brent actually hadn't meant to use that word. He was just flustered as a player at times. So it can go both ways, but we do need to open the channels, I think.
Yeah, okay. Also, to the calling out.
Do you say that? Like, in your perfect world?
Yep.
Because there's and we hear Hutchie bang on his drum about this all the time around open access. Well, what's open access? Like, what do you want to see as a journalist?
I'd like the players to say what they really think. I think that. Again, there's no such thing as a perfect world, and I'm not as big on the access, because there's conditional access, there's provisional access, there's access within...
Because we're still really accessible as players.
I actually, when it comes to the word access, yeah, but you're not getting much out of that access.
Yep.
I would like, again, I'm not one to subscribe naturally to we got to do what they do in the States, because it doesn't work on so many levels, but the attitude that the athletes have in the States, I would like to transpose over to Australian footballers, because they do speak their mind on everything. And if it blows up a locker room, well, obviously there's a good story there, but that's what they honestly think. Now, we're not going to get that in Australia, though, are we? So,
no,
and that's an extreme too, I know that.
It is, but we don't have the number of stories that they have in the States. Yep. There's just not enough action that's happening week to week. there's only so much that's really, really relevant over in the like it blows up all the time. But because the next day there's all of a sudden a story. One day it was Westbrook that just wouldn't answer questions. The next day it's Harden talking about how he should have been fouled. Then it's to Tom Brady. Then it's NFL. Like it just changes.
But there's teammates blowing up with other teammates too, which is another extreme on it as well.
And we don't want that as players.
No,
but we're just unfortunately. There's just not that many stories within our...
And that's true.
Because and partly because, as you said, as players, we're really conscious of what we say. And a lot, they don't want to give more than they have to, and they don't want to create stories out of what they perceive to be nothing.
But when you ask what would ideal world, and there's no such thing, we both know that. But I have so many conversations off the record. Nearly every conversation I have is off the record. So it stays off the record. Yeah. But I know what that person is thinking about said topic or said person. You put a recorder or a camera onto that same person a minute later, it's sometimes the opposite. Yeah. So if you ask me if I could abridge what it is I think was needed, it's that. It's a change in that, having enough confidence to say what you actually think when the cameras are on.
And I think if everyone did that and it just became the norm, then we'd live in a far more exciting and entertaining industry than what it is now.
There'd be some teething problems, no doubt. We on this side of the fence would beat up the first 15 times it happened, but by the 16th, it's probably the norm.
And as you said, exactly, after there's just so many stories on it, then it just becomes the norm. And all right, well, he speaks his mind. Well, that's fine because we've got the next story, the next one, So I think culturally we're just not used to that.
And we're not going to get there
as Australians. No, well, I think in Australia you see someone with a Ferrari parked on the side of the road, you walk past and you say wanker. In the States, it's what has he done to achieve that success? I want to emulate that.
Ben Graham has always said that, hasn't he? He's experienced it firsthand. Yeah.
It's like when you talk player wages. Players are overpaid. AFL players are overpaid. You're talking the States, and we're talking vastly different sums of money. But that conversation, it just isn't had. It's just this cultural thing that we have, I think, as a nation.
Do you want to plant any more on the chin before we move off the media, Paddy?
Not yet.
Because it's your forum if you want. That's it.
No, that's all I had. I'm sure something else will come up.
Anything else on media? Because I don't want to leave it if there is something else you want to say.
Just highlighting. We all have a role to play in growing the industry going forward. And just the thing that sort of disappointed me for the whole industry, I think the negative story has become bigger than the positive. I think failure has become bigger than success.
Is that a perception more than a reality?
Oh, perhaps maybe
because, while again you referred to that thing about Hodge, I mean,
I'm not specific. I'm not talking.
No. Okay, I'm just saying. But I reckon we probably bat at 80% positivity as a collective.
Maybe that's what we're. Maybe as players, you're just attuned to seeing the negative things, and you say, here we go.
It's very rare to get someone to comment publicly, or not that I care about this, by the way, but the positive stuff you do, you don't get any feedback to that. And I'm not asking for it, by the way, but it's just that it is the negative stuff that is highlighted, which can be 1% of what you do in total on a given week.
That probably happens a lot with players as well.
Yeah, it would be true. Yeah. Paddy, the game, you've had views on the length of the game and the length of the season. I've
been smashed for this, Damo.
No, I reckon this is what needs to happen. I think the game should be shortened,
which I
per
totally
quarter,
agree with. Yep.
And I think the season should be shortened totally. But no one can have this conversation without someone accusing you or another player who says it of wanting the same amount of money but providing less. I would argue you're going to provide more and better content because it's compacted and therefore of a higher quality.
Well, I would argue that as well. I think if we want to make the game truly fair, then you play everyone once or you play everyone twice.
Yep.
With the scheduling and with ground availability, you cannot play everyone twice.
It's just too long.
You just can't. It's too long. The game is too physically taxing.
So therefore it's once.
Therefore it has to be once.
So are you working toward this potentially on 2023 when the new deal's up?
There's plenty on our board that are happy to play more games. If you spoke to Phil Davis right now,
he's got the other, hasn't he? Yeah.
Phil would the total the other direction to me, and Phil's VP of the Players Association, and he bats really strongly on that front, and I can certainly understand that. I think there's even discussion points if you were to reduce the length of games, then you could potentially increase the number of games that we played. Now that doesn't speak to in making the game fairer than what it currently is. It certainly doesn't. But if we're talking about growing the game in itself, and we're talking the physical dollars, the growth behind that, then perhaps you could reduce each game by 20 minutes, but you could increase the season to 24 games or to 26 games. I'm not sure how open the AFL are to changing season length. It certainly won't happen whilst...
Is that your preferred model? Everyone's got a model. Is that your preferred?
I would prefer that we'd reduce games to sort of 100 minutes.
Yep.
That reduces it by a quarter each
week.
Each week, 20 minutes a quarter. I think we're going to get a greater quality of games. I think our greater players, our better players, are going to last longer, and every supporter wants to see their best players play for longer. And I think there could be the potential to play more games, potentially. I haven't worked the numbers out in terms of how many games less you'd play because of that. Maybe it could be back-ended where you could increase games. Or you could reintroduce State of Origin, or you could improve the way that AFLX has been played. There's so many different things that you could look to change within the game. Albeit only slight, that could improve the quality that we've got.
Yeah. Your career, 2007 drafted, played the 2 games in 2008 while still at school, 2009 a good chunk of games. 2012, though, was the breakout year, wasn't it? A preliminary final finish and the first of your top 10 Brownlow medal finishes, which is a run you still continued right through until last year when you still made the top 10 in 2018. So do you still feel you're on the improve, or are you working with your best and just trying to prolong it?
I suppose it depends what you talk about in terms of improvement. I reckon you could ask any player and they're improving in some capacity, but it's probably not physical. They're improving their game, they're understanding the game, and visualising it better. I think I'm seeing the game far better than I ever have previously because I've been in it for 12 years now. So you're just understanding space more. You're understanding the game plan more. You're thinking more outside of just your own performance, and you're looking holistically at how the team's playing. Physically, I think, and I've said this a few times, I reckon your window for your best performance is sort of 26 to 29. So I still think I'm right in that window. And there's plenty of players that are showing that they can defy that. Travis Boak's a great example with how he started the season. The challenging thing for anyone, and Father Time doesn't wait for anyone, is just how demanding our game is. And that's why I come back to, if you could reduce the length of games, reduce the minutes that we play per game, we'd get more out of our players. And there's only so much talent within the country at any one time. We'd have more talent on the ground.
On the ground, yeah. That 2012 season, Paddy, how important was that for you to have that breakout year, given the impressive build up to that moment? But that was the one where the competition just stood up and go, right, there's that top 10 draft pick that you're always going to be. Yeah,
for me it was a change in position, but it was also a change in philosophy around training in pre-season for me. That was the first year in the off-season. I ran every second day, and that wasn't part of my program that I'd been given. But
did you tell the club that?
Yeah, I did. Yeah. Well, not before I left. When I came back and was running really well, I said, "What have you been doing?" I said, "Well, to be honest, I've been running every second day."
Because they'd say no these days, wouldn't they?
Yeah, they would. And I physically I couldn't do it now because you change, your body changes over time. But I just needed to get really, really fit, and I came back and run the best I'd ever run by a country mile, and it just enabled me to get to more contests and give myself more time in a game style where I played, where I was very much bull at a gate. So I didn't understand the game as well as I do now, but there was more time because physically just so much stronger and fitter than I'd ever been. So that gave me the base and then the opportunity to play in the midfield rather than half forward. Like, we can be critical at times of players that are starting their careers, but I think the players that are starting their careers in the forward pocket and half forward, like, that is the hardest position to play on the ground. So we've got to be careful, I think, with just how harshly we smash really high draft picks that are playing those really tough positions, because it can be starvation corner at times, especially if the team isn't getting the ball into the forward line.
And I know you don't like talking too much about yourself, but the fact that 2012...
Ask my wife that, Damo, she'll say, he's very comfortable talking about himself.
Your own achievements then, maybe. 2012, you're 7th in the Brownlow. Then from then on, you've gone 5th, 6th, 1st, 2nd, and 10th. It's a record that stacks up with anyone in the history of the game.
Yeah, I think if you had been talking to the 20-year-old, I'd just be pumped. How great's that? Wonderful. How terrific am I? But it doesn't mean anything, unfortunately.
Really?
And that's with respect to the Brownlow, and I have great respect for what the award means to so many and for what it means within our industry. It just doesn't mean anything because you can't celebrate it with anyone whilst you're playing. And maybe as time goes on and you look back on your career and you're proud of your achievements, which I certainly am, but it doesn't. There's no story there to go to share with someone where you've both succeeded, that you've both worked so hard. It's something that you've done individually, which is terrific, but there's no story that you can just share and have a beer and have a chuckle and have a laugh and what about this? Oh, what about when we came in? I couldn't believe that. Like those are the stories that you just – that's what keeps you going as a player. That's where the enjoyment comes from, and you just don't get them with those individual accolades. As wonderful as they are, they just don't stack up to being able to share it with someone.
Yeah, okay. Tim Kelly, teammate of yours currently, going through what you went through in 2015,
Yep.
What do I do next year? You handled it so professionally at the time, and I know you spoke about it on the run, you've spoken about it since. What are you saying to him?
Look, it was probably something that I look back and go, that was one of the most well-handled things I've done in my time because I knew for so long what I was going to do.
How long?
Easily 18 months. Yeah.
So we're talking 2 footy seasons you knew.
Yeah, I had it in my mind. And the key for me was always this story never changes, never wavers. It's the same language, it's the same words, because then there can only be so many headlines. And eventually you'll get bored of it because I'm just trotting out the same answer.
So what was it from memory? I know I would have heard it 1,000 times.
Look, I haven't made my decision yet. I'm really enjoying my footy. My focus at the moment is on making sure that we finish as high as we possibly can. We return to finals and we play excellent footy. And it's just said over and over again. So in answer to your question, I haven't really sat down with Tim, to be honest, and discussed what he's going to do or where his head's at. I said to him at the start of the pre-season, we're here to support you and make sure that you play the best footy that you possibly can. If there's anything that we need to do as a club or individually as a player, then I'm here for you and we're here for you as an organisation.
Do you think he's known for 18 months he's not going to be there?
I think it's a real tough one for Tim because Tim, unlike myself, Tim's got three kids. So I don't think anyone can really judge Tim really harshly and say, how could you do this? How could you walk out of the club after the first year? Well, hang on. This is such a unique situation. It's not a unique situation because there's plenty of players that have been through it before, but you've got to understand where he's coming from. So I don't envy him because he's been lucky enough to be part of a wonderful organisation. He's playing great footy, and you never know what's around the corner, whether you're going to get that elsewhere. But he's got a decision to make. He'll take his time in taking it. That being said, the longer it goes, well, it doesn't necessarily bode well for the team that he's with, which is obviously us. But we still need to give him that time to make that decision. He'll make it when he does, and whatever it is, we'll support him as a footy club.
You will, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, as Adelaide did.
Absolutely. And that's such an important thing for your environment, regardless of what it is. And that's something that Geelong's always done. Adelaide certainly did. They're a real strong organisation to do.
Philip Walsh's passing in that year in question, 2015, Paddy. Again, I know you spoke about it at the time, but did that throw a different element into your considerations when that happened?
It didn't really. I knew the outside noise from some would be, how could you walk out on your teammates after your coach has been murdered and has passed away? But for me, it was because it was so strongly about family. It reinforced it, if anything, of how important that is. And you see the stories around people retiring and then passing away, and we've seen that unfortunately at our football club over the last couple of weeks with Pete Burnett, who passes away after retiring from being a publican. And never gets to enjoy the fruits of what he's worked for. So it reinforced it, if anything, for me. And, there's not too many weeks go by that I don't think about that period in time, that's for sure.
And Geelong giving something to Adelaide as part of that transaction, was that important to you personally?
Was at the time. I might have a different view on it now, Damo,
Yeah, I know.
as you remove yourself from the emotion of it all.
You might have had a 65-game player who's about to take the competition on if you had that draft pick.
At the time, because you're so invested in the team that you've been in, then, it was. I wanted it to be fair. The more ruthless me now might have a different opinion and say I'll just go through, through free agency and really put it on them. But, it was to make sure it was they'd been so wonderful to me over such a long period of time that it needed to be fair both ways, which I think it was in the end.
Yeah. And at the end of that year, that final you played against the Western Bulldogs, a bit of controversy in that game when the Talias supposedly exchanged information about match placements. What can you tell us about that now that there's 4 years have elapsed since?
Oh, that's was a blast from the past. Well, I wasn't a defender, so I wouldn't have a clue whether it happened at all. Would it happen with Tails? Yeah, maybe it did.
So the Bulldogs might have had a point?
But brothers, I tell you what, brothers love. But I wasn't privy at the time. We never had, I can tell you, hand on heart, that there was never any meeting that was, this is what's going to happen from a matchup perspective.
But you might have known something, maybe.
No, I honestly didn't. Not as a midfielder. Maybe we needed to be tighter as a midfield and defensive unit. We would have gone a bit further.
Who are your best mates at the Cats?
At the Cats, well, for me, it's really different because you go from an environment where you come through as drafted players. And for me, we were 8 players drafted at the same time and all pushing forward towards something and growing together and improving as players, people learning. And then coming to the Cats as an older player, it's total different dynamic. I knew Scott Selwood before I was drafted. We grew up playing together, same with Lockie Henderson, who was a really strong mate before we were reunited. But probably those older players. But as time goes on, you start to realise and you think back to your own career. I don't want to be the person that when I got to the footy club didn't speak to the younger players or was really intimidating. So I think the more time you invest back into the young players that you've got, the stronger you'll be as an organisation.
Have you got a special project player?
Charlie Constable, we've been working pretty close together. As a midfield unit, we meet every week and we're really strong on trying to improve each other. And that was the biggest thing when I came to Geelong and my convos with Joel was he wanted to make me the best player that I possibly could, and I thought that I could help him improve as well. And that was I suppose when we caught up, the real strong message. I'm going to help you, you're going to help me, and we're going to take this club to where it should be.
And you think you're getting there now?
I think we're getting there. I think we haven't been a disaster.
No.
We've played poorly in the really big moments, and you've got to confront that because that's the reality of what we've done.
And when you've confronted it, what have you found?
Oh, it's ugly. It's not standing up when the game really needs it, and that's as leaders we need to be better in those games where it's slipping. All right, we've got to recognise it rather than wait to quarter time and come down against Sydney and we're down by 30 points. No, we've got to be a stronger leadership group than that, and we've got to be able to rectify that mid-quarter and change the dynamic, which is even more important now with the new rules. So those are the things that we need to be better at. I think what we've got now, though, is a system that doesn't really rely on any individual. It is just collectively everyone contributing in their own way, and we can still have really good games where our best players don't play at their very best because we've got such an even spread. It's such a cliche, but it's true.
Yeah. Brian Cook, Chief Executive Officer of the Cats, spoke at a club function late last year about the need for change and things need to be done a little bit differently. One of those was the coach's relationship with players. How's that changed and for the better? Yeah,
I think this is the best that our coaches have ever coached, and whether it be being more personable probably hasn't changed too much for me because I think I've always had that really strong relationship anyway and not always needed it as a senior player. You don't need to speak to the coach every week. I think as younger players you sort of do need that contact with the coach, and that's certainly been more visible. I think they've been on top of the game, and Chris has been on top of his game with just seeing the game early. Like, we're not in games at the moment and going, geez, we didn't plan for this, we didn't prepare for this. We haven't been beaten anything by that we didn't know. And that's a good space to be in as a club because we're organised.
Unlike at least 4 players who are still from that premiership era at Geelong, you didn't have the Gary Ablett experience as a teammate until last year. How was it?
I liken it a bit to playing with Eddie Betts, just how excited the crowd gets. And you can't help but get excited on the field. And I would have never said that before, that you could sit back and watch a player whilst being on the ground. But you almost get embroiled in the emotion that the crowd has. And obviously there's very special memories with the Ablett name and Geelong. But you can't help but, when Gaz kicked that banana from the pocket on the wrong side of his body, I just stood there just in amazement during the game. Like, that shouldn't happen, but it did, because it was like, man, where is this guy from? It's just...
Even at that age.
Even at that age. And the last 2 weeks, I mean, how old is he? He's amazing. He's amazing.
Do you feel that he needed the year he had last year, in hindsight, just to work out what he wanted to be and where he was going to work out best in this new team, but old team?
I'm not sure. I mean, we could have done it better in hindsight if you had known. But the problem was, he still gets it 35 times in the midfield, and he probably still would. But I'm not sure reinventing himself is the right word. But gosh, he just understands how to play in that part of the game, and maybe the all-time greats can just do anything. He's certainly in that boat. He gives us such a different look as the rest of the forwards do in our forward line, that, you know, Gaz has that incredible composure, the beautiful finishing ability. Gary Rowan has this extreme athleticism, doesn't miss. Luke Dalhouse, dogged ability to put pressure on. And then Tom Hawkins, you know, doing what he's doing. And then there's our other younger players as well. It's just a really good dynamic, which he's fitted in really well with.
Yep. As we speak, Paddy, the booing of Ablett is still a relatively new phenomenon. What did you make of it when it happened as vividly as it did on Easter Monday?
I didn't realise at the time. I didn't notice during the game. And I said in an interview I did with I forget who it was after the game, and then you look on review and you see it really quite clearly. And whether it's linked to his like of Izzy Flowers' post, who knows? Whether it's because he's a champion of the game and he was destroying them at the time, maybe it's that. You don't know. You'd prefer not to see it. Unfortunately, fortunately, whatever you want to call it, it's a part of our game. I didn't like it. I didn't like it with Scott Pendlebury when he was talking. I understand the passion with our fans, and that is what makes our game great, how much you support your teammates. But once the game's over and it's done, it's done.
Yeah. Do you subscribe to the view that you need to tell, ask, plead with supporters to change ways, or do you just deal with whatever it is they want to subject you to?
I think you just have to deal with it. You can educate and say, well, reasons X, Y, and Z for whatever. I don't think we can ever tell fans what to do.
Yep.
You know, they are what makes the game what it is. That's how you have a job. That's how I have a job. That's the only way. So, you know, they're going to tell us what they want. I think we have to be mindful at times of the champs and of the people that have just made mistakes. You know, how would you feel if you sat in front of 90,000 people and every time they booed you? Well, for Gaz, it probably really doesn't affect his performance, but we've seen over time, and Goods is a great example of just how much it spoiled the game for him.
Did you have an awareness of that at the time, Paddy? I know you had your own issues in that same season, 2015, but did you
Yes.
could you feel that?
Yeah, it was just so sad for someone that's done so much for the game. I look at Adam Goods and think, you know, everyone sees the great things that he did on the field. I think one of the strongest legacies that he has is he's done what he's done, played the games that he has, won the Brownlows, the Premierships, the All-Australians, but he went and played in the reserves as that player and accepted it, and just what an incredible role model that would be for an organisation. No wonder people talk about the Bloods culture. I think that epitomises it as good as anything, that a player of that calibre can take it on the chin. Yep, I'll do what you need me to do. And like, what a role model for your organisation for someone like that to do it. That's as good as anything on the field for me.
Is that one of the great disgraces of our game? What happened to you?
Yeah, I think it is. I think it's a real ignorance from a lot that just didn't understand the situation at all, and so disappointing that someone, if you've met Goodsy, he's just one of the all-time great humans, can be subjected to that sort of taunt. I just think it's just so unnecessary. It didn't need to happen, and it's a shame it did. What's
the learning out of it, Paddy, as we wrap up this conversation today? What do we do next time if we go down that same path as an industry, as we clearly did to Adam, and he's still suffering from it?
Yeah, it's Oh, what's the learning? I mean, we don't want to see it again, really. How do you...
But the calling out component to it.
Yeah.
What do we do as an industry?
I think we need to continue to call it out. Certainly, that's and we've seen with the racial vilification that some of our players have gone through. We need to continue to call it out. And some people will say, "Oh, you're giving it oxygen. Just don't give it oxygen."
There is that element, isn't it, at times?
Yeah.
But you're all in on the call out.
I'm all in on calling it out. Yep. No. I think regardless of who you are, everyone's got a mate at some stage that if they do engage in something like that, you've got a role to play. You're just as bad as them if you don't stand up and say, hey, cut the bullshit. You don't need to do it.
How do you call out the mob mentality of what happened to him?
Call out the person next to you and expect that they'll do the same. Or if they don't, then the person next to them. You know, it starts with one. It starts with one boo. But it also, on the other hand...
It can be stopped by
stopped with one.
Calling out.
Exactly, yeah. You know, you think just because, you're in a crowd of 50,000 people, what I say won't matter, but you'd be surprised. And Goodsy's a great example, well, unfortunately, a good example of, the disappointment that can come from it.
Have you spoken to him about it?
A couple of years ago I did, once I caught up with him at an end-of-season function. And it was more around just sending him a message around how I support him, how I love him. Spent time with him in the international rules. He's just one of the great people. We're lucky enough to have the same manager, so we'd spent time together anyway. And just that you're there for them. And I think that's what you need to do as a mate. That's what you need to do as a supporter. If there's someone next to you that you know that whatever behaviour it is, you've got the role to play. Why shouldn't you be able to stand up and say, cut the crap?
Paddy, gone over time, but thank you for it. And thanks for being, as you always are, different.
Thanks, Damo. Thanks for having me.